Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh, joined by Mary Katharine Ham, host of Getting Hammered podcast and Normally podcast, who must listen to podcast as new media and alternative media destroys legacy media, watching it bleed out. Mary Katharine, I'm in California today, and I have in the studio with me an evacuee, my old friend Len, who had to flee, but he'll be able to get back into his house sooner or later. He didn't lose it all. You're a North Carolina gal, and you know the shortcomings of the federal government when it comes to disaster. What should the people of California expect from FEMA?
Well, I have tales to tell from the ground in FEMA, where I talked to Matt Van Swal, who's a resident near Asheville in a small town outside the bigger city, about the failures of FEMA, partly due to the fact that North Carolina hasn't gotten attention during these many months that people have been suffering. You know, winter came to Western North Carolina, but the hotel vouchers that people had for temporary housing from FEMA, they didn't account for winter or winter storms. So a bunch of families were being kicked out of hotels at the end of their vouchers without extensions and without grace during a winter storm. And there was luckily enough outcry online that some politicians got involved and some people with power got involved, and eventually FEMA said, okay, we'll extend them to like maybe the 20th or the 24th or so. But that was after several 24-hour extensions, leaving people literally out in the cold. So this is the kind of management that you're seeing in Western North Carolina, and obviously more pressure and attention, they perform better. But they've put some in the teens, like 16 or 17 temporary small houses in Western North Carolina, and tens of thousands have been requested. They're just failing on every front in ways that would be comical if they weren't so tragic to the people on the ground. And I'm just hoping that people pay attention to it in addition to the LA fires, because on both fronts, you're going to have issues here.
Now, what's interesting, I don't know the size of the population impacted by the North Carolina disaster. In Los Angeles County, 10 million people live there. Probably half have been impacted some way, and a small number have been devastated. What are the numbers in North Carolina? Because it should have been easy to handle if it's under 100,000 people, even if it's under 500,000 people. California is a nightmare of rebuilding coming up. What are the numbers in North Carolina?
I'll say a couple things. The numbers are hard to know because there are still people unaccounted for. There are 104 on the list of those who we know have passed away and did in this storm situation. The man I was talking to, Matt Van Swal, he didn't have power for 3 weeks. He said after Helene hit, they were so isolated that he thought it was likely that Florida didn't exist until he got service back, like several weeks later when it was a couple days that he was able to travel out and get some news. But they really thought they were getting the least of the storm. So they thought the rest of the coastline must be just completely gone. So that was the level of isolation out in the mountains. So the terrain is tough. So I'll give that to emergency responders. But the thing is that when the government's not doing the work, a bunch of nonprofits stepped in and did very hard work. Greg Biffle's out there with a private helicopter serving people. And at this point, senators are calling the people on the ground who are not FEMA people to say, what's your list? Here's a list of people who need help. Can you get there to help them? Because FEMA's not there to do it. So no matter what the size of the population, it doesn't bode well that they couldn't do a smaller job in, granted, a relatively isolated area leading up to this.
Now, Mary Katharine, you're a pragmatic conservative. You're not reactionary. You're not far right. You're just a sort of normal Reagan conservative. Can we ever fix the federal, state, and local government? The government collapse in California is extraordinary. It's the worst I've ever seen. I mean, 9/11 was the worst disaster in America, but the terrorists didn't send us a note that they were coming. We knew the Santa Ana winds were going to hit 100 miles an hour. We knew that out here, and still all this government couldn't do anything. Is there any way to fix this?
I think if there's a way to fix it, it is you have to put leaders in charge who are willing to make the boring basics great again. It's not a glamorous job to do emergency management. It doesn't get a lot of headlines until something happens, right? But you are supposed to have a guy who sits in a room and thinks of 750 things that can go wrong, and then thinks of 3 or 4 contingency plans to deal with those things. The people who are leading in many places, particularly in California, Newsom is a great example, They think they're spiritual gurus, not governors. They think that they should be thought leaders, not actual leaders. They are interested in signaling, not actually solving problems. And that has led them down a very bad road. And these are the results. Because look, disasters are disastrous. Bad things are going to happen. But you have a solemn responsibility, if you are in charge of resources, to stage and understand those resources in such a way that you can mitigate harms.
And I hope you and Vic talk about this. The all-purpose out, the absolute excuse has become climate change. Gavin Newsom says, the hot gets hotter, the dry gets drier, the wet gets wetter. It's like the dog ate my homework every day, and the teacher is supposed to buy that. Do you think that works? Do you think people fall for it? The Santa Ana winds have been recorded for hundreds of years. Hundreds of years of records of the Santa Ana winds. It's not extraordinary. We had a fire in Bel Air in 1961, which was devastating. We had the Oakland Hills fire in 90 or 89. This is not new. This climate change excuse enrages me.
No, it enrages me too. It's a total dereliction of duty. I think there's a segment of the population that will cut more breaks than I will to Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom because they think climate change has made the situation worse. That does not mean that you can't do work to make it better. That's your job. But they have really just let go of the controls and made themselves happy with just speaking into microphones. But that does not, or in the case of Karen Bass, disappearing entirely for a while, but that does not address people's problems. And I think even people who think climate change has made all of this a more dangerous problem are still going to be upset that the problem wasn't dealt with, and that as if no one saw it coming, when in fact, y'all all talk about all the time how this could happen.
Now you just reminded me, we got 30 seconds. You just said y'all. There are no SEC teams at the national championship, Mary Catherine. Just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. No, thank you for pointing that out. And I would also like to be part of a class action lawsuit for all of these, both Ohio State and Notre Dame players praising Jesus and making me kind of like them. It's really uncomfortable for me. It is what it is. We will be back next year. Fight another day.
All right, Mary Catherine. Are you rooting for the Buckeyes, I hope, at least?
I don't know what I'm going to do.
Oh, go for the Bucks, Mary Catherine. And everyone go get Getting Hammered, which Mary Catherine hosts. You can subscribe anywhere podcasts are available. And her new podcast, Normally. But Getting Hammered, we'll be talking about North Carolina tomorrow. Get that episode. I'll be